We are delighted to have you tonight here with us for another program from the Health Informatics program events. This particular event is called Chat with Health Information Professionals. And so we have a long history providing different type of programs for the students so they have a rich learning experience while they're coming our program. We are aware that a number of our students that they enroll in the Health Informatics program, data science, come with a pharmacy background. So therefore, there was a decision made that for the academic year, 2024-2025, especially for the fall semester, there will be a number of different initiatives that they were related to this topic. So my name is Anna Cleveland. I'm a Regent Professor and the Director of the Health Informatics Program in the College of Information. It is with great pleasure that at this time, I will invite Dean Kenchik, the Dean of the College of Information, to give the official welcome. Dean Kenchik.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this amazing panel. Dr. Anna Cleveland, thank you for arranging this panel. I just wanted to kind of appreciate what you are doing and what this health informatics program, that how it is providing students this kind of opportunity to understand what's happening in the field. And of course, that makes the program really high quality, and there is no surprise that the program is ranked very highly in the nation, and what our students are getting, and especially that considering what the background they are coming in and providing them based on that, this opportunity. So I'm personally looking forward to learning myself. This is not my research area, but that makes it more interesting for me because I get to learn something that I do not already, I'm aware of. So welcome again, everyone. Thank you again for joining, and looking forward to the panel. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean Kenchik. So before we start, it would be, I think, nice for the audience to know how this program came about. We always think about the topics, like I told you before, but then it was no-brainer to go and reach to Dr. Spence, who I want to say not only is part of the MD Anderson family, but also he's part of the UNT family. He's an adjunct professor, but also he plays a very vital role in the leadership board for the Dean of the College of Information. So having our meetings, and we started this in June, and thinking about drug discovery and everything that happened in safety, we decided, okay, this is a topic that is very timely, and also who will be the experts that could be invited, and he started putting his team together at MD Anderson. So first of all, before I proceed, I want to thank Dr. Spence for your labor, for the work that you have done to bring this wonderful program today, and as well as all the different presenters, the panelists. You will see in a minute that Dr. Spence is the one is going to be the moderator. But I want to tell you that the topic of the program today is advancing drug discovery and safety, the role of information and analytics in a healthcare setting. And of course, the healthcare setting in this particular case is going to be UTMD Anderson Cancer Center. We decided to have panel members representing different areas. And the first one we're going to be dealing with drug information. And for drug information, we have two scientists that they're coming from the Division of Pharmacy, Medication Management, and Informatics. And those are Dr. Villanueva, she's the manager of the Clinical Pharmacy Services, and Dr. Rivera, who is from the clinical pharmacy specialist. For medical safety, we decided that it would be good to have the representation from the Division of Pharmacy, Quality and Regulatory. And that is Dr. Welch and Dr. Drayson. Dr. Welch is a clinical pharmacy specialist as well as Dr. Drayson. When it came to pharmacy analytics, then we thought, okay, what department is going to be represented here? And we had the Division of Pharmacy, Quality and Regulatory. Again, but we had Dr. Feng, who is the lead information analyst in that department, and as well as, of course, the manager of the pharmacy analytics, and that is Dr. Spence. So that's the team that we have put together for today's dialogue. At this time, I would like to pass the microphone, let's say, pass the floor to Dr. Spence, who is going to be the moderator of this panel. We would like to tell you that the panel have received the questions, they have had a dialogue, a discussion, and how is it that we are going to proceed. So welcome again to each and every one of you, and Dr. Spence, we're looking forward to listen to their comments.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cleveland, and thank you so much for your kind introduction as well, Dr. Kinshuk. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to have my esteemed colleagues with me tonight. I cannot tell you how happy I am about this. I've been looking forward to it since we were brainstorming about it a couple of months ago. And I think that the information couldn't be more timely to discuss in light of recent events, which we'll highlight as we go through the discussion. But without further ado, there are basically going to be three parts, as Dr. Cleveland alluded to tonight. So the first part will discuss drug discovery and development. The second part will be around drug efficacy and safety. And finally, a time to really just think about what the future of drug information and how technology impacts, drug information and drug discovery in the, years and decades to come. And then hopefully some time towards the end for students to voice any questions that they might have to our esteemed panelists tonight. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. So the first really set of questions is directed towards what is the history of drug development? So that's the first question, or the first part of the first question. And then the second part of the question is, and also, how are current processes for drug discovery occurring today around regulatory agencies like the FDA, and how do they oversee current practices around drug development, efficacy, and safety? And so Jennifer Welch is going to kind of take that first question, and then hopefully Mila and Mara can weigh in on the second part of that question. So Jennifer, let's turn it off to you to talk about the history of drug development.
Thank you so much, Jim. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Fantastic. So I get to give you guys a little history and just bring attention to the fact that we have come a long way in a short amount of time. Modern medicine is not as old as you think. And so I think about the fact that medicines I had available as a child were not available to my father, who's just 30 years older than me. I also think about during my childhood, HIV was really a death sentence, and now patients can live long lives with the medicines and the advances that are available. And so when you think back to a time before we had commercial products and pharmacies that we could go to, we really turned to nature and healing herbs, folk medicines, things like that. And it was all trial and error. And we did not have the ability to determine what about these plants were helping us and what about these plants were hurting us. And so we were not able to really identify or quantify any of the substances in those plants. And then at the beginning of the 19th century, a new technique called solvent extraction really helped with that. And the first time that we didn't have to rely on drugs coming from nature was when synthetic organic chemistry came about. And so that led to the industrial production of synthetic drugs. And that led to, of course, new potential. So I found a publication that really kind of breaks drug discovery in modern times. And it talks about three main periods. The first notable period is going to be the 19th century. And they basically really relied on medicinal chemists to have some luck and figure out what was going on. And then the second period was around the early 20th century. And that's when drug structures were found and molecular modeling techniques came available. And then you have the late 70s and early 80s where recombinant DNA technology became available. So to kind of put that into perspective for you, in the early 1800s, we were able to extract morphine from opium. And then in 1872, chemoreceptors and the birth of chemotherapy was being discovered. And then in 1929, we accidentally discovered penicillin, which was a huge deal. And then you get into the 1970s, you had monoclonal technology coming about. And then the early 80s, that recombinant DNA technology allowed us to produce human insulin, the first recombinant drug approved by the FDA. Then you had in the late 90s, embryonic stem cells were isolated. And then by 2003, we had a complete map of the human genome. And then by the late 2000s, new molecular entities were being approved for cancer treatment. So that gives you an idea that we have come a long way in just the past 100 years. And to give you an idea about how simple drug laws were, I wanted to point out just a couple of big ones. 1906, the Food and Drug Act. It just simply states it prohibits interstate commerce in misbranded and adulterated foods, drinks, and drugs. That's all it says. And then in 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act came about, containing new provisions. Of course, it extended its rule to cosmetics and therapeutic devices. But the interesting provision is that it added that drugs had to be shown to be safe before marketing. You would have thought somebody would have thought of that with that first rule, but they did not. So we live and learn. So then in 1962, Congress amended that same act, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, to require that new drugs have to be shown to be effective as well as safe. And so that puts this big gap in all these drugs that were approved from 1938 to 1962, which creates a group of drugs that pharmacists know as DESI drugs, or the Drug Efficacy Study Implementation. And that was a program established by the FDA to go back and make sure all those drugs that were approved without efficacy studies to show that they're efficacious. And I still think the FDA is probably reviewing those drugs, to be quite honest with you. So I'm just wanting to point out that this really shows how language within laws can change over time, and how we have been learning as we go with drugs, drug laws, drug development. And a new drug could be pursued if researchers learn new things about a disease, or maybe they're able to do testing now that they weren't able to do historically. And just again, you can see that we've come a long way in a short amount of time. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleagues for some more current information.
Hey, Jennifer, I can speak a little bit to how the process of drug development and the FDA's involvement. I'm not as familiar with the preclinical portion of it, so I'll briefly go over that. But basically, there's so much involved with it. The first step includes the discovery and development process, which we'll get into a little bit more about how much that's changed. And then there's all of the research that's done preclinically before it even gets to humans. And then there's all of the testing that goes into it from the human aspect to make sure that it's safe and effective. And only then does the FDA get more involved. So the FDA does a review, and in cases where the drug's already shown to be safe and effective for its intended use, then the FDA will work with the drug applicant to get all the prescribing information and get the label ready. And if there are any other issues that need to be worked out, they'll work those out. Sometimes the FDA will even include, I don't know if y'all have heard of their advisory committees. Sometimes if they need some more information, if it's not as clear cut, if it's safe and effective and they will approve it, then what they'll do is they'll bring in some experts. And so they have different advisory committees in different areas of expertise, like antimicrobial drugs or arthritis drugs. And so they'll bring in experts, and there's also not just like scientists and experts in those fields, but also people who are there to represent the consumers, to really be there on their behalf. And so they'll provide their perspective also. And then even though the clinical trials are really important, and a lot of the safety information and the efficacy information figured out during those clinical trials, there's no way that you're going to get all the information you need about the safety of a drug in that time frame, especially like with expedited approvals for certain indications. And so because of that, it's really important that they also have that last step where they, even after a drug is FDA approved, there's a lot of data and analytics that goes into capturing safety information after it's approved. And there have been labeling changes that have occurred after. Usually we try to catch as much, or, you know, the FDA and us working in healthcare, we try to catch as much as we can beforehand, especially like when we're involved with the studies at MD Anderson. But that's not always possible. There's no way you're going to capture everything. And so the post-marketing drug safety monitoring is really important. There are also changes that get submitted from the applicant, from the drug manufacturer. So sometimes there are changes that they want to make to the labeling. And so there's different applications that they have to apply for with the FDA that have to be re-reviewed depending on the changes that they want to make. And sometimes those changes are safety changes. And one of the things that we've struggled with in our field is keeping up with those safety changes. Like, we review medications as they're approved by the FDA or as our institution brings them into our hospital formulary. But it's much harder to keep up with all the changes that are happening all the time. And as technology increases and we have more data that's being captured and used, that's more like safety signals that are going off, or potential issues that are being captured. So there's more to respond to. I think those were the main things that I wanted to highlight, but I know Mara had some more to add.
Thanks, Mila. So my commentary is going to be on some of the things that we've seen more recently that deviate from the norm. So Jennifer did a great job of outlining like the history, and Mila talked about what the approval process is, but sometimes there are alternative pathways that we follow based on the available data, based on the situational, you know, I'm going to use the pandemic as an example. So a lot of you have probably seen these medications, the vaccines, the therapeutic agents that were brought to the market before they were fully approved, right? They went through an expedited process to allow the use to the public. And so emergency use authorization is something that is permitted to the FDA to grant authorization to use these products in the event of a national health emergency, whether the threat is infectious, as it was with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also if there were like a chemical, biological, even a radiological or nuclear threat. There's this ability for the FDA to bring products to market faster in the event of an emergency. The other thing that I want to talk about is some of the advances that we're seeing with regard to getting drugs to the market faster, or getting what's called almost generics on the market that have enhancements. So, you know, the novel synthetic compounds that come to the market, and then the generics, there's actually something in between where it's not quite generic. It has some kind of enhancement to the product that makes it more easy to use. So for example, if it's something that we prepare in pharmacy that goes into solution better, has better stability, or is easier for the patient to receive, those go through a different pathway where they don't have to go ahead and redo all of the clinical studies to prove effectiveness and safety. They can reuse some of the data from the original applicant and the original agent and get that product to the market as a sort of a new entity. And then with our biologic products, those are the ones that are created using cells. So that's like your insulin or some of these monoclonal antibodies. And then there's the approval pathway for biosimilars, which are very similar to that biologic product, but because they don't have to redo all of the original effectiveness and safety studies, it's faster for them to come to the market. They increase market competition, and so because of that, cost goes down. And so there's a lot of implications with these other approval pathways that help with, you know, enhancements to the products, making them easier for patients or better for pharmacy, or improve sort of the landscape in terms of cost. So I just wanted to highlight those things as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Welsh, Dr. Drayson, and Dr. Villanueva. So I feel like we could talk about most every one of these questions all night, but we probably ought to keep things rocking along here. But thank you guys so much. That was excellent information. So our next question is really about AI and machine learning and how that can impact the various stages of drug development. And as some of you may have been paying attention to on the news just recently here in 2024, the Nobel Prize for Chemistry was awarded to Dr. David Baker from the University of Washington, and to also two scientists from Google DeepMind in London. And they produced a product or a product using AI that could basically model proteins, which of course are the building blocks of life, in literally minutes that used to take genetic scientists sometimes weeks or months to even come up with. So of course they just won the Nobel Prize in chemistry using AI. And so I just found that fascinating and wanted to provide that just as a bit of background. But I wanted to now kind of turn it over to Chun and Mara to just talk a bit about how current analytics activities will bolster AI in future years as they see it. And then Mara to speak a little bit about how AI was used in some drug development that she has seen previously. So Chun and Mara, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jim. I will just share some of my understanding about AI and machine learning on analytics. I think AI and machine learning and analytics are integrated together more and more. Using AI and machine learning can greatly enhance our analytics work we are doing now. So like analytics involves data connection, data processing, data interpretation, right? So AI and machine learning can help us in every way of it. So for example, AI and machine learning can handle large amount of data, making it easier for us to clean and organize data. So in healthcare, for example, machine learning can analyze medical images, right? For the CT scans, X-rays, those data to help detect disease earlier. In data interpretation, machine learning can help us find patterns in large data sets, make complex information easier to understand. So there are some machine learning methods, like we use our historic data to train the machines, right? To train the model. Then we can use the model to apply to new data, then make predictions, right? The next one is predictive analysis. Like as I just mentioned, machine learning uses past data to produce future trends. For instance, credit card companies, right, can assess the likelihood of issuing a credit card. When you decide to apply a credit card, then you just go online to finish your application. Then the decisions made almost immediately, right? But there is no human in the backend. It's all machine, right? And for another example is like if you and your friends always shop at the same department store, right? But sometimes the department store can give you totally different promotion incentives based on your shopping history, right? In healthcare, I think machine learning can help us identify the risk for diseases. So it allows early treatment. Another area of machine learning and AI can help us to identify anomaly situations, right? it can spot unusual patterns in the data. For example, again, we have been in Houston for all the time, right? But someday you decided to go to a trip in New York. But when you try to make a purchase, your transaction might not go through, right? Or you get a call from your bank to say, is this you doing the purchase, right? They are trying to protect you, but it's a machine learning tool too, to help to detect unusual activities. Another area in data analysis, AI and machine learning can help us is natural language processing. I think in your informatics department, you work a lot on the NLPs, right? So machine learning and AI can help us analyze those text data to extract valuable insights. I think based on my experience previously, a test data analysis, it's really hard. But now, since we have NLP, it makes it's much easier. Another thing I think AI and machine learning can help us is do optimization, right? We will talk later on supply chain management, right? AI and machine learning can improve our process and improve our marketing strategies by analyzing different scenarios. So then to optimize our process. Another aspect I can think of AI and machine learning can help on analysis is data visualization, right? AI tools can present the data in a very clear way, make it easier to share findings with others. As an analyst, the above are my understanding of AI and machine learning on analytics. And now I'll turn to Mara to share some of her understanding of AI and machine learning in drug development. Thank you.
Thanks, Chan. So in biochemistry, there's this concept called structure-activity relationships. And it's basically how a molecule's chemical structure correlates with its biological activity. And one thing that they've started to do in using cloud-based supercomputing and AI machine learning models is sort of abbreviate that process and sort of predict which drugs are going to be worth sort of pursuing to bring to market. And the one example that I have is Paxlovid, and I'm going to preface with I no longer work for Pfizer, but and I'm not speaking on their behalf, but Paxlovid is the oral COVID antimicrobial product, and it contains 2 antiviral medicines. One is a new protease inhibitor, which is a type of drug that would act on viral replication. And then the other one is a drug that's been used for decades as a booster to increase the levels of protease inhibitors in the HIV population. And so when they knew that they wanted to pursue a protease inhibitor that would be active against COVID-19, they were able to use models and simulations to screen millions of possible protease inhibitor compounds and use virtual screening to select which molecular changes would help to enhance the activity of whatever candidate they chose. And then supercomputing helped them identify molecules that could be used to deliver it as an oral form instead of having to give it as an injectable. And overall, this is per the press release, technology was able to reduce the computational time by 80 to 90%, which obviously was a critical reduction in that time to market because we were in the middle of a pandemic. AI and machine learning techniques helped the teams bring that drug design to fruition in 4 months. They also used AI and machine learning for clinical trials so that they could perform quality checks and analyze vast amounts of data 50% faster than before. So that's just one example of how, our ability to leverage AI and machine learning to sort of narrow down all of the potential drug candidates based on their structure, based on their proposed activity, in order to bring these solutions to the market in a more rapid way and bring them to the clinical trial setting and analyze them in a more efficient way as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara and Chun. That was absolutely fascinating. Yeah, this stuff is just so terribly intriguing and really shows the value of AI and machine learning going forward in healthcare. So without further ado, we'll move into the second portion of our questions, which is around drug efficacy and safety. And so the third question that we're going to pose to our panelists tonight is, how are healthcare providers using targeted therapies, genetic therapies, and other clinical data to personalize drug treatments for patients? This is kind of getting to that cutting edge of medicine now, where we're including, genomic information and drug information to really target therapies to patients so it will be most effective. And so I'm hoping to engage three of our panelists on this question. First, Jennifer, the role of the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee on reviewing and approving these types of therapies. And Mila, to you, perhaps to discuss emerging sciences around this process. And then Mara, again, to you around the concept of next generation sequencing. So Jennifer, we'll turn it over to you first.
Absolutely. So I'll start with, what is the P&T Committee? It stands for Pharmacy and Therapeutics, and it's an interdisciplinary committee that's usually made of pharmacy, nursing, and physicians. Now, it can have other members of the institution as needed, but those are the three key players, because this committee is charged with formulary management. And a formulary is usually a list of medications that a hospital has readily available. And that is really so that that hospital utilizes their resources appropriately, so that they can have the right medications for the patients that they are treating on hand at all times, if possible, save for drug shortages. But we can ask Adriana about that later. But the formulary management is usually, the formulary system is a lot of different things in addition to that drug list. So the formulary system are things like policies, restrictions, things in your electronic health record that pop up to help providers use these medications in a safe and effective way. So the P&T Committee has a very big job, and every drug that is put on a hospital's formulary must go through that P&T Committee. And that's actually a regulatory requirement, that institutions have that committee to help facilitate safe and effective drug use. Now, what is a targeted therapy? So the American Cancer Society has a very general explanation that's probably geared more towards patients. And it just states that this is a type of cancer treatment that uses drugs or other substances to precisely identify and attack certain types of cancer cells. And they go on to explain that these therapies can be used either alone or in combination with traditional therapies. So you think of cancer treatment, chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, things like that. Now, the National Cancer Institute gets a little more specific and explains that these therapies target proteins that control how cancer cells grow, divide, and spread. And they explain that most are going to either be small molecule drugs, which makes them small enough to get into cells and target things inside the cells, or they could be monoclonal antibodies, which are proteins that are produced in the lab, and they attach to specific targets found on cancer cells. So examples of some monoclonal antibodies, I believe both Mila and Mara mentioned them earlier, are things like trastuzumab, bevacizumab, pembrolizumab, and rituximab. And most types of targeted therapy are very different from chemotherapy, because chemotherapy kills all the cells that grow and divide quickly, whereas this targeted therapy interferes with specific proteins that help these tumors grow and spread. So the targeted therapy hopefully decreases toxicity, but they are not without their toxicities. Now, targeted therapy can help the immune system work to destroy cancer cells. It can stop signals that form blood vessels that cancer needs to survive. It can also deliver cell-killing substances and cause cancer death. And it can starve cancer of hormones that it needs to grow. And I'm just going to highlight two newer therapies that I think are fascinating. The first is CAR T cell therapy, and that is therapy that uses the patient's own T cells to fight cancer. This just came out in 2017 when I started at MD Anderson, and these therapies are customized for each individual patient. They are made by collecting the cells from the patient and sending them to a laboratory to re-engineer them to put proteins on their surface called chimeric antigen receptors, and that's where the CAR comes from in CAR T. And so those CARs recognize and bind to specific proteins or antigens that are on the surface of those cancer cells. And then, of course, the T cells came from the patient, and that's like the backbone of the CAR T cell therapy, and that's part of the patient's own immune response. And so we have major safety practices around this particular therapy, and the teams are very much aware of all of these practices and safeguards that are in place. There's an institutional algorithm. They have to have checklists. They have to have screenings for the patients. They have to consider prophylaxis. They have to evaluate the grading of adverse drug reactions associated with these drugs. So there are major safety things put into place for this therapy. And then the second is called BiTE therapy, bispecific T cell engager. And these are small dual targeting antibodies. And they basically activate anti-tumor, cytotoxic, and cytolytic mechanisms by directly linking with the cancer cells with the T cells of the patient. And some examples of those that just came out over the past few years are things like teclistamab, talquetamab, and elrentamab. And I believe that's all I have for the PNT committee and the targeted therapies. And I will turn it over to Mila.
Thanks, Jennifer. I really don't have a whole lot to add to what Jennifer said. One of the things that I just want to point out is kind of why we're talking about this. Until recently, a lot of the medications that were being approved were not biotherapeutic drugs, but currently more than half of new drug approvals are biotherapeutic drugs. So drugs that have the drug products been manufactured in or extracted from or somehow synthesized at least partially from biologic sources. And so that includes these gene therapy products, but it also includes the monoclonal antibodies and all these other like things that are tissue engineered, stem cell therapies. Those are all biotherapeutic drugs, but gene therapy products specifically are the most rapidly growing number of these approvals. And so I was going to say each year, but really like each month you see more and more of these products in the pipelines. And so it kind of changes the safety parameters that we have to put into place, because it's very different, the things that we have to consider when it's not a gene therapy product. And in particular, a lot of these gene therapy products use viral vectors, which are also used for other things. But we've really had to take a look at some of our processes in place for hazardous drug products and what we're doing with viral vectors and how we're treating that as an institution. And I'll hand it over to Mara to talk about the next gen sequencing.
Thanks, Mila. So I guess I have two different concepts that I want to discuss. So one of them is that in the past, drugs were really approved for very specific cancers. Like this is a drug for melanoma, this is a drug for colon cancer. And now we're seeing more of these therapies that are considered tumor agnostic, where if the patient has a specific mutation or biomarker, we expect that this drug to work based on that mutation profile. And so we're seeing drugs like there's this combination of drugs that were initially approved for melanoma, dabrafenib and trametinib, that target this very specific BRAF V600E mutation. And now the indication is solid tumors with that mutation. And so as we're starting to understand the sort of consequences of various genetic mutations, therapies are becoming more broad in their application. And then vice versa, in the past, we also were only able to test for one specific mutation at a time. We would say, does this patient have HER2 positive breast cancer? Does this patient have that BRAF V600 mutation in their melanoma cells? But now there's this concept of next-gen sequencing, which allows us to test for a whole like flurry of mutations in one test simultaneously. And from there, identify things from that patient's tumor that can be targetable. And so from there, we can identify, you know, what potential targets are there, what potential therapies would act on those targets, and what is the likelihood of that particular agent actually having a response. And so when we see these in the patient's charts, we'll see, you know, which mutations there are, including some rare ones that are novel that maybe there aren't specific drugs in the pipeline for yet, but maybe because of their behaviors, they act similar to this other type of mutation. And so there's actually, when you look at the report for a patient, it will not only show you what all the different mutations are, but which ones are targetable and which ones you might be able to extrapolate from literature in another cancer type and see if there may be a potential for activity there. And so it's really fascinating to see it on an individual patient basis where we're seeing drugs being used for lung cancer, but in a patient who has prostate cancer because of that mutation that they have that can be targeted.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely fascinating stuff. Again, I feel like we could talk about this all night. It's so interesting. So thank you for that. And so we're going to shift gears a little bit now to talk about medication safety from a slightly different perspective. And I don't think this could really be more timely based on some things that are going on currently around drug supply and drug shortages that are severely impacting our institution, MD Anderson, right now. And so I think this next question is rather timely. And so and Chun alluded to this a little bit earlier in her discussion of predictive analytics. But so this is really addressed more for Adriana and Chun to chime in on, but how do medication supply chain disruptions such as natural disasters impact patient treatment? And then how do you consider technology could be leveraged to better predict, manage, and recover from such disasters? And so Adriana, we'll perhaps start with you, and then we'll turn it over to Chun for maybe the second part of that question.
All right, thank you, Jim. So as Jim alluded to earlier, this kind of come at a perfect time right now about just a natural disaster affecting medical supply chain. However, I do want to just focus in that any type of supply chain disruption can have negative downstream effects in no matter what industry it is. And I feel like over the past 4 years, since truly the start of the pandemic, there has been more heightened awareness around supply chain disruptions, not only just from a healthcare perspective, but more so also from other industries, such as in the housing industry due to lack of materials for building homes, car industry due to manufacturing of certain automotive parts to produce vehicles, and as well as other things like simple as foods and other commercial products or clothing. And that could have been to various things, not only just from the pandemic due to decreased labor and such during that time, but also what we continue to see is that there's also a decrease of imports and exports. So pure economics does unfortunately affect supply chain disruptions. And from a healthcare perspective, though, any type of supply chain disruption, whether it's a medication or a supply, whether it's a product for tubing for administering a medication, to a pump that administers a medication, to surgical tools, all of those can have negative effects to delivering timely quality patient care. Not only those direct patient effects can be seen, but we can also be seeing other strains to the healthcare system alone, such as increased costs to bring in alternatives and resources, also decrease in satisfaction due to employee burnout and as well as lack of resources just due to having to function in a high stress, ever-changing environment because you have to come up with an alternative plan because you don't have the right supplies or equipment to deliver quality patient care. So in my role right now was helping manage drug shortages for the Institution of MD Anderson, we highly utilize our technology systems and as well as our health information for all of our steps and our mitigation plans for drug shortages. And really, there's multiple resources that we use in terms of managing a drug shortage. These are all public knowledge, and you're all welcome to go look up the information that's on the FDA website. They do have a drug shortage resource that provides information to what they consider a drug shortage. And then as well as a national organization that from us in pharmacy uses, the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, we use their guidelines to manage drug shortages. And as of right now, I was just checking just to see what number we are at right now for managing drug shortages throughout the nation. And we're at 301. And not just including the fluids that we're managing right now, it's also other medications. So there was a natural disaster that affected a facility for Baxter, which is a healthcare manufacturing company that not only manufactures intravenous and irrigation solutions that are essential for patient care, but they also do manufacture several other medical supplies. They recently had one of their plants in North Carolina affected by Hurricane Helene, which right now left that facility unoperational, and they managed or they produced 60% of the US market for intravenous fluids. So many hospitals across the nation, and this is now public in news, are scrambling to just come up with alternatives, make decisions in a quick time manner to whether or not they can proceed with procedures and other healthcare operational needs because they may or may not have enough fluids. So right now, what we are doing, we still rely on healthcare information and technology to make our decisions on a day-to-day basis. And as part of our process, we use things such as our inventory systems, where we log in all of our inventory, account for it on a daily basis. We can have that automated through automated dispensing cabinets, which we hold perpetual inventory, which is kept daily. There are some products that we cannot keep in that time, so it requires additional labor to physically count products, which we're doing right now in our institution for certain fluids. But also, we do utilize that to kind of assess how much are we using per day and how much can we keep of additional supply if we're able to bring in. We also use our electronic health record. The electronic health record, since its inception, I want to say in the early 2000s, has helped in terms of capturing data, not only from a payer perspective or other just informational, but also for the institution to assess its utilization of where medications are being used, how they're being dispensed, who are the key prescribers, who are our most critical patients. We utilize that information on a day-to-day to then assess where do we need to reserve, prioritize, where can we use an alternative of a medication in terms of still having some quality patient care delivered. So we utilize the EHR or the electronic health record in terms of identifying our critical patients. So there are multiple EHRs throughout the nation. And if there are those, we definitely recommend leveraging those, not only just for your assessment, but also for your communication. So as part of our communication, we also utilize our information systems to at least give awareness to providers what's on medication shortage, what can you do in terms of an alternative. But further, we also utilize our information from our wholesalers, our procurement resources in terms of what products are available for us to purchase. And a lot of that we've been seeing a more robust and as well as novel technology with AI in terms of forecasting and potentially even leading to additional early warnings of a supply chain. And with that, we look with our wholesalers which we procure our medications or products from to assess how are they doing in terms of receiving products from manufacturers, how are they doing in terms of releasing the products to their customers, which would be institutions or clinics, and as well as are they able to continue to meet the needs through all of their customers around the country. And that's something that we're actually currently looking into through other technologies that are and resources that are with us here at MD Anderson. We'll look to see if there are other institutions that are able to get certain products and how are they utilizing certain medications. So there is some information sharing, and that sometimes does help in terms of assessing and planning for any type of supply disruption. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chun to go over a little bit more on the impacts for AI and the predictive and managing drug shortages.
Thank you, Andrea. And I think Andrea and I already covered very comprehensively. I just want to share my feedback, like on analytics part, right? I think for drug shortage and drug utilization, I think there are two major aspects. The first one is the inventory management. I think in healthcare, I think our inventory management has it's not as managed as well as some of the like department stores. I think this is an area we can improve in the future. For example, like if you go to Home Depot, you purchase a bag of nails, right? I think their inventory can tell you how many are there in their inventory. But I think for healthcare, sometimes we are not as good as them yet. But I think we are trying to catch up, right? We are doing better and better. Like our new EHR system is a dramatic improve compared to the previous like EHR system. Another one is the demand forecasting. I think if we can analyze our past usage, then predict future drug demand, that will help us keep the right stock levels, right? And also real-time monitoring to say, okay, how much drugs we have now, what type of patients are using this type of medication, found the predictors for inventory management, right? And also reduce waste. I think the current situations for nationwide shortage actually can provide, if we think from the positive part, it can help us gather data for the past events, right? Then like our AI and machine learning methodology can use our past events data to predict and to predict the future and to avoid a situation like this to happen again. That's all. That's what I have. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Adriana and Chun. We appreciate that insight. So we've just got a few minutes left, so we don't want to fly through the last question, but certainly I think we're getting a bit strapped for time. I feel like, again, we could talk about all these topics all night, but we should probably keep things moving. So the last question is really for all of our panelists to weigh in for just a couple of minutes to give their thoughts about what they see as the futuristic role of technology in healthcare, especially maybe as it relates to oncology care, what we do at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and just give maybe a couple minutes of what they see the future looking like with technology, AI, machine learning, those kinds of technologies. So perhaps we could just start off kind of in the order I see folks on my screen. We could have Jennifer weigh in first, then Mila, then Chun, then Adriana, and then Mara. Maybe you could bring us home. So does that sound okay?
Sure thing, Jim.
Okay.
So I will give you a little bit of information, which is very little because I don't know much about AI, to be quite honest, but that is a huge topic in national organizations. And I went to an earlier pharmacy meeting this year, and they really pushed the idea home that AI can help us, but AI plus a human with knowledge is better than either one alone, which is something that I had never thought about. And the things that they said were available with AI, even now, that I didn't realize were things that can increase safety with patients in a hospital setting, or maybe you send them home with something that can alert someone if something happens, or say you might have a pendant that the patient can wear and it'll record the doctor visit and summarize it for them so that they can remember what the doctor said. So many family members have told me the doctor said something and I was like, there's no way the doctor said that. And so I feel like it could be a great way for people to, remember what was discussed. They also talked about patient counseling and how you could create like a comic book for a pediatric patient that helped explain to them why this medication was important, how they would take this medication. And it would be in a way that they could understand it, maybe their favorite cartoon character. So I think that AI has a lot of opportunities that I didn't realize because I was just skeptical of it at first. But I also think there will have to be restrictions and regulations around it in healthcare to make it safe.
Thanks, Jennifer. I was just going to add that we know so much more than we ever did, and what we know will continue to increase exponentially with the use of HI, which will produce more data. And so, for instance, we do a lot of proactive risk assessments at work, and we would go through manually and kind of try to not guess, but, you know, use our knowledge to determine what potential risks could occur in the future if we implement something new. And it was a similar manual process for the FDA when they were implementing new drugs. But with the use of AI, you now know ahead of time a lot of these potential risks that either you would have to determine manually or it would have just taken so much longer to find it. Like with the FDA, they use AI to find potential safety signals in post-marketing event data that gets reported to them. So it used to take them a long time, like they would need a certain amount of this adverse event data that gets reported to them to find these safety signals to potentially change labels of drugs. But now they're getting those safety signals sooner with the use of AI. And so there are more labeling changes happening and they're occurring earlier, like the drug just came out and already within the first year, you'll have labeling changes related to safety. And so I think a struggle for me and a lot of us in healthcare is that we have so much more data at our fingertips than we ever did, but knowing how to act on that data and choosing what to act on and in what order is still a struggle. Like we're inundated with data, but analyzing it in meaningful ways and acting and implementing things based on that data is really the rate limiting step, I think, at this point. And so I think in the next 5 to 10 years, AI will be used more to help with the actual implementation pieces in the future. I think it kind of started with like getting the data, and then it'll move towards like what we do with it. And so real timely, last thing, even today, I went to a webinar during lunch on use of AI for order verification. So freeing up pharmacists for other tasks and using AI to help with those orders that are kind of more straightforward and mundane. And so Mayo Clinic is implementing something with that, and so they were presenting on it. So it's just really interesting to see it now more in the operations side of things.
Thank you so much, Mila. Before Chun jumps in, I apologize. We are to the top of the hour. I am hoping that it would be okay if we expand our time by perhaps maybe 10 minutes so that we just have a little bit of extra time to get the last question answered and then maybe a question or two from the students. Is that okay from our panelist point of view? About another 10 minutes. Okay, thank you. Chun, sorry, off to you.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, I know a lot of students today may be interested in analytics jobs in the future, right? I want to talk about my thinking about AI and machine learning on analytics positions. I think some people may think, okay, there are maybe some potential challenges, right? AI and machine learning can do a lot of works. Oh, then how do we find our position, right? I think as machines take over repetitive tasks, there may be fewer jobs available for analysts who mainly do entry or like a simple reporting job, right? But some traditional skills that analysts use may become less important. I think that's true. But I think our analysts can also thrive with AI because although AI can analyze large amounts of data and spot patterns much faster than people, but I think this also helps analysts to make better decisions based on those insights. With AI handling routine tasks, human analysts can concentrate on more strategic areas, right? Like interpreting results and providing context that the machine might miss. Analysts can also work alongside with AI, using their expertise to improve and guide the information generated by machines, ensure it's relevant and actionable. I think, but as analysts in the future, I think we should have a range of skills. I think as far as we try to continue to learn and master a range of skills like statistical analysis, data manipulation, programming, know some machine learning basics, right? I think with AI and machine learning tools, we can be more productive. Thank you.
And I will be brief in my what I see as the role of AI in the next 5 to 10 years. I think for my role and what the role I've been doing for the past 7 years at MD Anderson is just seeing more the interface between multiple areas that we use on a database basis, such as our wholesaler inventory systems, and as well as using information systems through other organizations that we can share to see where the supply chains are and where potential disruptions could be. There are many other avenues as well as where AI can help us in terms of leveraging information from assessing, not only medications in terms of its use and effectiveness, and as well as where it could also lead to where insurance companies may, have a preference of one versus one medication to another, and assess also the economic part in terms of what the reimbursement may be if we were to switch to one medication versus another, as well as we can also get information on what, how the supply chain stands in terms of, stability of the supply chain. A few years ago, there was a new medication for respiratory syncytial virus that was a vaccine that was introduced for infants. This was all last year, and unfortunately, that was supposed to be given to all newborns. Unfortunately, the manufacturer, shortly after introducing that vaccine out, had to declare a supply disruption because they did not appropriately forecast what the rates were of new births for the upcoming year. So they did not have enough supply. So AI is now leading towards that of forecasting, as well as predictions of when there could be any new therapies or therapeutic agents being developed, as well as any type of supply disruptions and any type of advantage of making changes in therapies, either an economic or a clinical aspect. So I think that there's a lot of room for AI and its future in the next 10 years.
I'm going to put my hopes and dreams up there, because the way that I see the role of AI sort of in the future is to anticipate my needs personally. And so I want the drug companies to be able to gather insights on the questions they're receiving and be able to support us on a wider scale with fewer delays in getting the information we need. I sort of had the same idea as Mila in terms of, being able to identify those safety signals earlier, but also identifying the factors that could, predispose the patient, or indicators that could predispose them to a response, or maybe identify that dose response relationship a little bit earlier. I also selfishly would like it to know when we're doing something that is novel, that is a medication use that's driven by extrapolation from other data, and collect that data for me so that I'm able to make decisions about whether or not we should continue to do that and allow those uses. And essentially, and this sort of goes back to what I think everybody has said, is that I would like AI to supplement the work that I am doing to allow me to function on a higher level, so that I'm not spending my time pulling literature or data and instead focusing on planning on how to use that information and how we can both improve our patients' outcomes as well as meet institutional goals and those financial goals and outcomes as well. So I'm putting it out there more as like a wish list, and hopefully manifesting that those advances will come in my lifetime, so that we can really work at the top of our licenses and help our patients.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Unfortunately, Dr. Drayson had to jump off. She has 2 small children and it was bath and bedtime, so she had to jump off and take care of them. So thanks to Dr. Drayson as well. Thank you, Chun. Thank you, Dr. Rivera. And thank you, Dr. Villanueva, for just an outstanding panel discussion tonight. I just felt like I gleaned so much from just this open discussion and just learning from you guys, and I felt like a sponge tonight. So thank you so much for your time. Dr. Cleveland, I know we're kind of up to almost 7:10. Is there anything you wanted to do at this point? Did you want to?
Well, I just didn't know whether there was anyone, we hate to say no question and answer, and of course we can always address them to you. But I think because of the time, and we want to closer to 7:10, maybe next time we ought to say, leave more. The panel have been absolutely marvelous. First of all, I want to thank everyone who has attended. And like I said, this was very limited to the audience. And now after seeing this, I think we should have opened it much more. So first of all, for the audiences to have come. I also want to thank the faculty that is in attendance and as well as Dean Kenchik. I would like to showcase Dr. Haiwa Chen, because Dr. Haiwa Chen is here, and actually he's broadcasting this to a class of 50 so many students, so you won't see the numbers. We hit, I think, 99 one time, but he's broadcasting and he got all his students together. And this topic that we have discussed today is very much relevant to the work that he does in AI and the application of AI, including to the area of pharmacy. So, of course, we have our technical support with Adam Chavez, that we could not have done it without him. Dr. Spence, thank you very much. So my closing remarks is as this, and I was trying to write fast as we were doing. Y'all were talking, and I said, what is it that I have gained? That's what I always tell my students. What is the key points that I gained from here? So closing, I would like to say that I would like to invite everyone to reflect in the insight that we have gained today. I think we have gotten innovative strategies that they were presenting. We have heard some of the research projects that they're going on. But I saw also the critical importance of safety in pursuing of new therapies. And I think that they came across very clearly. I think the challenges in drug discovery are significant, and as well as drug safety. But I think what is important, I would say from my angle, and I would like at least the students to ask, what is the role that we can play in dealing with drug discovery and drug safety? I think in each and every one of us, and we saw that represented in the panel today, we have a place, and how is it that we can contribute it? And finally, I want to thank the panel members. I think for your participation today, but it was obvious as you were talking about your passion that you have for what you do and for your dedication in this field of discovery and safety. And I know you have heard this, but just to tell you from UNT, we want to thank you for the impact that you have in patient care. An impact that you have goes beyond the walls of UTMD Anderson Cancer Center. You have a global potential for a global impact in patient care. And that is a wonderful way to think of your contribution to humanity.